Welcome on into the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and it is time to look through preseason week 2, some of the takeaways that we have, and there are some very important ones this week. This is why we pay attention to everything this time of the year, because some of our takes were more speculative earlier on in the offseason. Sometimes we get surprises, and we need to not be too stubborn, but also we need to not overreact. What we don't want to overreact to is stat lines specifically. There's a lot of things going on in these preseason games, and stat lines can be misleading towards what will actually happen in the season. But what is more representative of what might happen in the season are players' usages and situations that they come in and off of the field and how much they're playing with the ones and not. And unfortunately for a few of my takes, I'm having to take a step back on some of those rookie situations that haven't quite gone as well as I had hoped or anticipated. So let's get into each of the games, any of my takeaways from the games, and that'll be the video. So if you like this stuff, please like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can come and join us for some free mock draft practices for your regular drafts. And I'm thinking next week I'll be going live more than just that. So keep an eye out on the channel for those opportunities. Let's move on to the first game, looking at Friday, Tennessee versus Atlanta. And I just have one minor takeaway here for Tennessee. Gunnar Helm, that's a name that I talked about last week as a super deep sleeper kind of guy. He continued to impress this week. He caught 4 out of 4 targets for 48 yards and a touchdown. This is an offense. There's opportunities in the receiving group in general, tight ends and wide receivers overall. There's just opportunities for receptions in this offense. No guarantees on where a lot of those receptions will go throughout the season, about 70% of them. No guarantees where those will go. So he's somebody we'll keep an eye on. Once again, super deep league. There you go. Maybe that's a name that you think of at the end of the draft if you want 2 tight ends. Kansas City versus the Seattle Seahawks. Just a little update on our boy here, Brashard Smith. He had a few nice rushes and a few nice receptions, totaled 38 yards on 5 touches. That's over 7 yards per touch with a long play of 10 yards, which is nice because that means that's not skewing that those yards per touch data by anything. He was just consistently being productive. So that's always nice to see. He is still not a guy that I'm going to be targeting, however, despite a nice game there, because it's the Jerick McKinnon role. The best case scenario I see it as is late season. He's going to have a few games where he has big games like Jerick McKinnon used to. He'll still be an incredibly risky start, but in an emergency, maybe you get lucky when you play him. I think that's kind of the best case scenario for him. I'm not going to get too hyped about that. There needs to be quite a few injuries for him to get an actual starting opportunity there. Let's move on to Miami versus Detroit. Now, these are going to be in a different order than I wrote them in, so it might take me a moment to find them. But I got Miami versus Detroit here. One takeaway from each side of the ball here. For Miami, I've had it ranked like this all offseason. I think that Ollie Gordon is the running back to own behind Devon Achane, who did just come up with, my understanding, is a calf injury. No real further information on that outside of the fact that the team says they're not too afraid of it, but I don't really care what the team says at this point of the season. It is concerning. Wright, who has been running as the guy behind him currently on the depth chart, has not impressed. Ollie Gordon has impressed with his opportunities, albeit probably versus worse talent than Wright has faced. Still in camp and everything too. Wright just hasn't really had a whole lot of great buzz behind him, so I personally think it's Ollie Gordon is the guy to own. Of course, week 1, it still might be Wright, so I'm not dying to get either one of them onto my roster, but there might be some early season value there if Achane's going to end up missing a week or two. Hopefully that would be it maximum, considering I drafted him. And then for Detroit, Isaac Tesla continues to impress. His stat line here, 4-5. 41 yards, 1 touchdown. That's very nice, and I believe that he has had an end zone target in each preseason game that he has been in so far this offseason, so that is something to let's not get too excited. He's at the very back end of deep targets that you could take at the end of your drafts. For me, there's a possibility there, especially, of course, with an injury at some point. That'd be a nice offense to be a part of. Even if I think that it's going to be lesser than it was last season, I still have quite a good confidence in it still being a great offense. Up next on the list, we have Carolina versus Houston. Several takeaways here, unfortunate for some of my stock, but first takeaway here for Carolina is going to go in hand-to-hand with something that I did do in my projections for this team. Rico Dowdle looks locked in right behind Chuba Hubbard as a guy who's going to be stealing some of his work. Both backs only received 2 carries in this last game. Rico Dowdle added a catch for 15 yards himself. Speaking of catching the ball, Rico has been the third down back with the ones in both preseason games. And this is why I haven't been as high on Chuba Hubbard as others have been this offseason. I am expecting Rico Dowdle to take some of that workload, some of that floor, and some of that ceiling out of the hands of Chuba Hubbard. And then for Houston, we have some takeaways. So we'll start with the good for my preseason takes, which is Nick Chubb. Took all of the reps with the first team in the game. Averaged 5 yards per carry with him, didn't look too shabby, so that's good because the news around how he's looked hasn't been great. Not that he broke one for 40 yards or anything, probably past those days for Nick Chubb. But also I want to point out that we cannot forget about a gentleman named Dameon Pierce, who might be a nice fit in this offense as well. He is a guy who I don't think should be going behind Woody Marks. If you are taking like the backup situation in here, assuming that Joe Mixon does miss time or a lot of time or the entirety of the season, I think that Dameon Pierce is the guy. Woody Marks is a specialist, and he is still working behind Dare Ogunbowale. I think he was drafted to be the eventual replacement for Dare Ogunbowale specifically. And Dare Ogunbowale, if you're not too familiar, he is an established veteran in the league who does a very good job at what he does, and I just doubt that Woody Marks will steal the job from him. If he does, we'll probably know because Dare probably gets cut then, going into the season. But I think that's how it'll go. I think the veteran skill set of Dare will continue to he'll hold on to the job unless Woody Marks is truly impressed in all of the little things that you need to do as well in that role. And then we come to some of the bad here for my takes. Targets, while CJ Stroud's on the field. 3 targets go to Nico Collins. 2 targets go to Christian Kirk. 1 target goes to Jaden Higgins. And so that's kind of promising, right? Jaden Higgins gets a target. We like that. That's fine. Well, it appears that Jaden Higgins is running behind Xavier Hutchinson at the moment. Now, he didn't a week ago, but now he did. And so there is some concern there, especially for someone like me who went and popped off and took him in the 9th round of my draft. And I had told myself I'm not going to take him there. And then it was one of those things where my pick came up and I just said the name. And part of the reason for that was recently in a draft, he went quite a bit early from someone, and so I was just, I wanted him. I don't think I would do that anymore. I have moved them back a little bit in my rankings. We draft these rookies, and there's going to be more names like this 2 more of these names that I have liked all last season, and I have also said this all last season. When you're drafting these guys, you're not drafting them for week 1, week 6 even. You're drafting them for that second half of the season. That's usually when rookies will come out and do well. And I still have a lot of faith that Jaden Higgins will become like the number 2 target in this offense as the season goes along. But there is added concern there, right? Now, the good thing still in Higgins' corner here is, as I understand it, he is running with the ones in camp for the most part. Maybe that's something we see flip this week. He has been listed as the starter on the unofficial depth chart for the team, which doesn't carry a whole lot of weight, but the buzz at camp has been good for him as well. So still a lot of things to like here. A little bit hesitant. I'm not gonna like I said, I will be more willing to let somebody else get him. Am more willing to hold off on like popping off on him early is all it is at this point. Maybe that changes throughout the week again or by next week. Things are a little bit fluid right now, but the usage for Jaden Higgins was concerning, and we cannot just ignore it. Miami versus Detroit. No, we're going to go to Green Bay versus Indianapolis there next. And running back for Green Bay Packers, backup running back, Marshawn Lloyd, probably not the backup running back. He suffered another injury. He has been injured back to back ever since he came into the league, drafted last year. If you were planning on grabbing him as a backup for a running back in Green Bay, you probably shouldn't, or if you have him on your roster, there might be some other better opportunities that will come up even later in this video for that. The last game in this video will have someone that you could look into. And then for the Indianapolis Colts, Anthony Richardson returned just 1 week after dislocating his finger. At least I think my time frame's right on that. Regardless, he's back. I don't know who's going to be the quarterback there. And as far as the RB2 goes, DJ Giddens appears to have locked up his role as the RB2 behind Jonathan Taylor after receiving all of his reps with the ones over veteran Tyler Goodson, or at least incumbent. I don't know if he's quite a technical veteran here. I don't think he's been in the league for 4 years yet. But nonetheless, it looks like he has taken over on the depth chart over Tyler Goodson at this point. Preseason, never know for sure. Team could just be testing things out, giving them a trial run. New England versus the Minnesota Vikings. A couple of things for New England. Of course, you've heard it by now. TreVeyon Henderson, he looks good. He averaged 5 yards per carry on 4 attempts. And also, just a shout out here to Afton Chisholm. Went 6 of 6 for 71 yards and got a touchdown. In the Josh McDaniels system, the slot wide receiver historically has been very valuable, but I do believe that is Demario Douglas's job, and I do believe that he would have to get injured, being the number one target, like the favorite target of Drake May last year. He's going to have to go down in order for Afton Chisholm to have any kind of value. So I wouldn't get too high on Afton Chisholm if there's somebody out there touting him. Don't get too excited. Up next, we've got Cleveland up against Philadelphia. And for Cleveland, Dillon Gabriel looked good until he made a mistake or two. But still, overall, he did look good out there. He was a little bit more aggressive than Shedeur Sanders, a little less safe. And especially in the preseason, I'm okay with that. But he looked good. Who knows who's going to win that who's going to get the opportunity at some point, probably this season, to be looked at by the staff. I would assume it's Dillon Gabriel, but there's obviously far from a guarantee. And then for the Philadelphia Eagles, if you still thought that A.J. Dillon was the RB2 in town, well, Shipley sat out the game with the ones. He is, and twos, I guess, he's very clearly the handcuff to Barkley. The team feels comfortable with him. So if you want the backup there for Saquon Barkley, it's Will Shipley. Probably be a little bit more of a split than it is with Barkley when he's on the field. Nonetheless, that's the guy to own. San Francisco versus the Las Vegas Raiders. A few things here. One, for San Francisco, I'm sure you are aware of it. Brock Purdy hyper-targeted Ricky Pearsall. His stock's going to be a rising. But I do want to put a little bit of water on that fire. No Christian McCaffrey. No Juwan Jennings. No George Kittle. No Brandon Ayuk, for what that's worth. Now, Brandon Ayuk's not going to be there for at least the first 6 games of the year, it sounds like, and who knows what the ramp-up period is once he does return, how many weeks that might be, and who knows if he's ever back to himself this season. So that's a less of a concern for Pearsall for me in terms of fantasy, but it could be something late season that would take some of the luster off of Pearsall if he does start hot. But I don't want to look into that stat line too much, given who was not on the field. And I am expecting Juwan Jennings to be there week 1. That is how I have my rankings still to date, but that's far from a guarantee. Of course, if Juwan Jennings is missing some time and it's Ricky Pearsall, McCaffrey, and George Kittle, Pearsall could get off to a hot start on the season. And then we look at the other side of the ball, Las Vegas Raiders. Here's one of those takes where we got to put some cool water on something that there's already been some cool water on this, but at this point, I was still a little bit optimistic for the situation, but Jack Bech continues to be a second unit receiver very, very clearly, just 2 weeks or 3 weeks away from the season start. It's just not great news for his outlook at this point in time, at least for any kind of early season breakout success. Still a guy who definitely could earn a role, be there later season. However, on the other side of things here, The positive. I mean, there is still some positive. I'm still not off of Besh. He was running with the ones during practices throughout the week, as my understanding from looking at some of the local beat reporters and what they had said, and he had a really good week. I know that one for sure. He also had a couple of nice plays while he was in the game, once again running with the twos, however. So there's some positives. Early season. At this point, it does not appear like Jack Besh is going to be one of the first three guys onto the field. And then for more on Las Vegas, Ashton Genty looked good. There you go. Yeah, he's good. And then Michael Mayer continues to work as the tight end, while Brock Bowers comes in and out of the game while the ones are on the field. All in all, I'm just not concerned about this in terms of where I think Brock Bowers should be drafted. Now, if you are taking Brock Bowers early second round or anything like that, I do think you have to be a little bit concerned. Maybe your expectations were a little bit too high. This team brought in a lot of other weapons. They're going to be more run heavy. Those targets are going to be more spread out. Brock Bowers is not going to get the same amount of targets overall, I don't believe, that he did last year, but I'm still not concerned about him. I still have him in that top tier of tight ends. I'm not overly like, oh my God, he's going to be so bad. Baltimore versus Dallas. All we got is Dallas here. Javonte Williams continues to rest with the starters. Didn't have to play in the game because he's the starter. Miles Sanders and Phil Maffa, they don't get any rest. They're out there playing, fighting for that backup role. And Jaden Blue is still hurt, so could be a slow start to the season for him. I guess maybe be a little bit careful with what your expectations are if you draft him, but I still think that there is a dark horse hope for Jaden Blue, and in a receiving role could always just have a nice floor for you on a team who's probably going to be passing quite a bit. But Javonte Williams, 0 RB. I've been talking about this all offseason, a little bit less as of late as, rumors of Miles Sanders, Phil Maffa, Jaden Blue were all blooming. Javonte Williams is a very, very good option if you just need a safe running back on your roster for whatever reason that's going to come with some sort of floor. That's to bring us on to the Battle of Los Angeles. LA versus LA. Got a few things on the Chargers to start out here. Another pouring some water on one of my warmer takes throughout the offseason, a player who I'm not so willing to take so high, coming up in a moment. But first, let's talk about Lambert Smith. Keandre Lambert Smith. A guy who I really liked in the draft process, rookie. He's the backup at X, apparently, for this team. I'm surprised by that. But with Quentin Johnston's injury, Keandre Lambert Smith was the one who went in, not Trey Harris. So Keandre Lambert Smith's going to probably have an opportunity here in order to even win a job. So definitely dark horse opportunity in terms of taking him late in your draft and just seeing what happens over these next couple of weeks. Like I said, surprised that Trey Harris was not the man to come in that situation, but he just doesn't appear to be looked into it, looked at some of the reporting from the beat writers that has been coming out of camp, and Trey Harris is the backup as the Z on this team, which means that that's like the position that, depending on the alignment and everything, either Ladd McConkey or Keenan Allen is going to be in that Z role, but it's going to be shared by them, which in three wide receiver sets and stuff. So that it appears that Trey Harris will need an injury to one of them in order to get on the field, and a Quentin Johnston injury doesn't get him on the field. That's what it appears like at this point in time. I still have a lot of faith in Trey Harris. I'm not as high up as I moved him down my rankings a little bit, right? I'm not as high up as I once was on him. The path seems quite a bit rougher than I had anticipated with Keenan Allen joining the team. That was the role that he was going to have, apparently, and then he's not the X, apparently, which I thought he could be. Lambert Smith is the guy that they like for that role. It appears to be. It's preseason. Maybe they're just testing things out. Who knows? Maybe more will come. I'm hoping we'll get some more out during camp this week, see what the team is doing during camp to see how things might change throughout the week. But let's look at the Los Angeles Rams. Blake Corum is running ahead of Jarquez Hunter still. So if you want the backup running back for the Rams, for Kyron Williams, that's the man. And now on to the Battle of New York, the New York Jets versus the New York Giants. And Justin Fields continues to struggle after a bad week of practice. I moved him back in my rankings some time ago. He was a guy who I started out a little bit warm on and cooled off very quickly, and there has been nothing coming out to suggest that I should get warmer on him. If anything, maybe could move him back even further. But, looking historically at his fantasy value, I don't really want to move him back any further than I have him, nonetheless. Concern about other players on this team, you look at the connection between him and Garrett Wilson, 0 for 3. 3 targets, no catches. And that has been my concern for Garrett Wilson for some time now in the offseason. I made a video about that. New York Jets, full send on the running back platoon. It seems absolutely inevitable now that there will be a platoon. I pretty much said the same thing last week. I've moved Breece Hall a little bit down in my rankings, but I'm still hopeful that he will still have a solid year. This is a team who's going to want to run a lot, so splitting some carries should be okay. Once again, a lot of teams do that, but for how highly we're drafting Breece Hall, maybe we're drafting him a little bit too high. What's holding me on to preventing from pushing him back into like the early 20s or so in my rankings is this hope of him being a really good receiving target for the team. And a little bit of concern of, I know Braylon Allen's been impressing and everything, but last year he wasn't very efficient when he did get opportunities. And I think that Breece Hall has handled everything really, really well in terms of not becoming a distraction, and seems to understand his place with the team, and seems to accept it to an extent of understanding that, like, this is his shot. He's got to prove himself, and I really like his talent, and so, I'm still holding out hope that he's going to prove himself and earn himself a nice little contract by the end of the season, at least, with a team. And then for the New York Giants, we've got Jackson Dart. Look, the boy's going to get an opportunity this season. Now, since before the New York Giants even drafted him, I was pretty high up on the thinking that the New York Giants were going to trade back into the back portion of the first round and draft Jackson Dart. So I've been talking about this for some time now. I think you put Jackson Dart on the field at some point in the season. Now, the only question now is, with this hot start that he's had in the preseason, is how soon? It's not going to be to start the season, but maybe it won't be just the final 5 games. Maybe it'll be halfway through the season. And sometimes this kind of thing concerns me for a player like Malik Neighbors. Nah, it doesn't. It doesn't scare me. I have enough faith in Jackson Dart, especially compared to Russell Wilson. Like, I don't think that we miss out on too much there, ultimately. And there's even a chance that it would get better. That will bring us on to Tampa Bay versus Pittsburgh. Tampa Bay, first unit offensive line, struggled, and we know that they're going to be without their left tackle for some point. I think the last news on him was better, though, than the initial news on him in terms of his time to return, but nonetheless, new offensive coordinator and everything. This could be a little bit of a slow start for this offense to begin the season with a banged-up offensive line, new offensive coordinator. That would be my only real takeaway from it. Not going to do anything really rankings-wise from that, but, just takes a little bit of the luster maybe off of some guys like Bucky Irving. And then for Pittsburgh, Jaylen Warren seems to have, we talked about this last week, but I would say officially cemented his role as being the RB1 to start the season. He got the game off this week. He did not have to play, whereas Caleb Johnson did, and Caleb Johnson had a good stat line. He looked fine out there, but he remained behind veteran running back Kenneth Gainwell on the depth chart. I'm not too concerned about that. I moved Caleb Johnson a little bit back. At this point, my question for Caleb Johnson is, when will he take over as the RB1A to Jaylen Warren's 1B? And at this point, it seems like that might not be for, at least 6 weeks in the season. So he might be a hard start for a little bit longer than I had been anticipating. And that's why I just went a little bit lower on him in the rankings. Arizona versus Denver is up next. And I feel like they're up top of my list. No, they're not. They're at the bottom here, too. Arizona, Trey Benson got to rest along with the starters. I don't know exactly what to make of that outside of the fact that that means that the team is very comfortable with where he's at. And if the team's very comfortable with where he's at, that might mean he eats into James Conner's workload, which we've heard rumblings of a little bit more than we anticipate. And I so want to move James Conner down my rankings. I don't know really what to do with ranking him. If this ends up coming to fruition, we're probably drafting James Conner too high, and I definitely have him ranked too high. So he's somebody who I'm like, I take him and I feel kind of comfortable with it, and then I think about it and I'm like, but I don't feel fully comfortable with it. So I want to take some other shots at running backs that have some more upside in case that just is a complete split there, which, I mean, it might be. And then we look at the other side of the ball for Denver. RJ Harvey looked good. He found the end zone and he got a target. So that's nice. That was on 2 drives and he was the only running back out there. Why was he the only running back out there? Well, because J.K. Dobbins rested along with the starters. Now, J.K. Dobbins is new to the team, so they obviously feel very comfortable with where he's at. He's obviously going to be a big role in this rushing game. Does that impact how I view RJ Harvey? No, I mean, that's how I've been having it projected, at least to some extent. Maybe not to enough of an extent would be obviously the one concern. But no matter what, whether Harvey's the 1A, 1B, I really, really like what role he will have in a Sean Payton offense. And I think that there's a very, very high upside for that. And I think that there is room to grow into getting more and more of a role as he impresses throughout the season. And so I still really, really am high on RJ Harvey, like him a lot. And, you know, it's nice to see that he looked good. That never hurts. Let's bring us on to the games on Sunday, starting off with Jacksonville versus New Orleans there. And several little takes on Jacksonville here, and then a couple on New Orleans. So Trevor Lawrence looked good. That's good. He's a guy who you can get really, really late, and I think will probably end up being a solid contributor, a good value for where you can get him. Has a QB1 potential, and he's still on the depth as a free agent in my league. Tank Bigsby, that's a 12-team league. Tank Bigsby, I should add to that, 12-team league where a lot of teams take quite a few quarterbacks too. Now, when it comes to the running backs for Jacksonville, some interesting things going on. We got Tank Bigsby, who ran with the ones on the first drive this week, kind of what we expected to see last week. Last week, Travis Etienne ran with the ones. This week, Travis Etienne did run with the ones on the second drive. And so how I still think that this is going to break down is that Tank Bigsby is like the first, second down back. Travis Etienne works in as a change of pace, as a 2-minute drill, as the third down receiving back, as well as potentially also taking like every third drive or so away from Tank Bigsby, giving him a bit of a breather. Now, a little bit of a kink in the system here that Bayshal Tootin ran with the ones during the practices this week. Didn't run with the ones, either preseason game. One of the reasons that maybe they do that is they're seeing if they're comfortable potentially getting rid of Bigsby or ETN, potentially just putting them lightly on the trade wire to see if a team would offer them something that they would want. And if so, how comfortable would they be with Tootin then as their next man up in... I would assume you would get rid of ETN and then Tootin would be the ETN guy. But it doesn't have to be that way. He could be he's kind of versatile in that sense. So very interesting. Looking forward to seeing a little bit more from them in terms of just clarifying that backfield for sure. Tank Bigsby, kind of the guy I want-ish. Full PPR, ETN. Trevor Lawrence says it's going to be hard to keep Parker Washington, slot receiver, for them off the field. I don't really know what to make of that. I'm not going to do too much of that. And Travis Hunter's dealing with an injury, didn't play in the preseason game, and this has been my big concern for Travis Hunter, his injury. I don't like to project an injury onto a guy, but when you're using him on both sides of the field, that does concern me, and in practices even putting more strain on him, and there we go, look at that. Not that one means the other for sure, just that one increases the chances for the other. More practicing, more chances for injury. For New Orleans, Chris Olave got his feet wet with his first action since I think it was week 9 of last offseason. And so, that's nice to see him get back out there. He did have a concentration drop. That's not been a historical issue of his, just probably a little anxious back out there. But, expect him to clean that up, so not too concerned about that, but no, impressive stat line. But part of the reason for that is we got Shook thrown to him. Is it going to be Rattler? Is it going to be Shook? Doesn't matter. I don't know. I just don't know. Let's move on to Buffalo versus Chicago from Sunday's games. And Caleb Williams looked good for Chicago as the second-year quarterback there. And that is obviously promising, and that's coming off of what has been said to be his best week in the practices leading up to the preseason game. So that's good. Seems like maybe he's getting a hold of the system. We'll see if that continues. That would be great if it does. And also, Chicago rookie tight end Colston Loveland got involved with the first stringers in the game, got a few targets, so that was very nice to see, especially for someone who is invested in him in the Fantasy Football League. And also, Olamide Zaccheaus is still ahead of Luther Burden on the depth chart, starting with the ones, but Burden looked good in his opportunity, as did Olamide Zaccheaus. Zaccheaus is the veteran. He is a part of the reason why I've had Luther Burden extremely back in my my rankings, but of course he is somebody who look to, as the season goes along, maybe earn that role from Olamide Zaccheaus and maybe become more and more involved in this offense. Still a lot of mouths to feed overall there in Chicago, which just makes me generally nervous for all of them to some extent. And that's going to bring us on to the Monday game, Cincinnati versus Washington. And some very interesting news comes out and then gets followed up on, meaning the team is serious about this. Brian Robinson on the trade wire. Brian Robinson cut candidate for the team. The team sits him. This means they're serious about a trade. They did not want to risk an injury to him and not potentially getting something for him. When it comes to Brian Robinson, drafting him right now, I dumped him down my rankings quite a bit because this seems inevitable. Does not seem like, even if he were to stay with the team, then how secure is that number one role for him with the team if that does end up being the case? But it just seems like they're going to move on from him one way or another here, and I don't see a better situation that exists around the league than what he had here with Washington. Also, then, news on the backup Washington situation. So, in this week's game, Chris Rodriguez played as the number one running back with the ones, and last week's game, he played behind Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, the rookie 7th-round pick, who has been absolutely getting all of the buzz throughout training camp. What's the reason for the switch? Who knows exactly? But I don't want to ignore that Chris Rodriguez was running ahead of Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. I assume there's going to be some sort of split there between these two. It feels like the most likely scenario, at least to start the season. But what I want to say is Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, ever since the college season ended, and the only reason that it has to be the college season ended is because of eligibility issues, because he was ineligible to play throughout the college season. He didn't get a chance to impress throughout the college season, but he did previously. That's why he got an opportunity on Arizona's football team, is that he has impressed throughout the entire draft process, throughout the entire offseason once he's been with the team. Every opportunity he gets, he impresses, and I expect that to continue. When he got drafted, when I did my reviews of each team's drafts this offseason, after the NFL draft, of course, I said very specifically, I remember what I said about Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, that he could be a gem in the rough. I think I called him a golden nugget of a pick late in the draft, that they might have gotten an absolute freaking steal with him. And so far, that has proven to be true. So, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt plays with the ones last week. I think he's the guy that I want to take the shot on. In fact, I did in my league where I have Jaden Blue. I have question marks. Jordan Mason's like my most comfortable thing behind not even Achane anymore. Achane's got that injury coming into week 1. Then I got Omarion Hampton. I feel fine about that. RJ Harvey, I feel good about it, but there's no guarantee there. Then we got Quinshon Judkins, far from any kind of guarantee, and Jaden Blue, far from any kind of guarantee of being fantasy viable. And so, especially with what that week 1 looks like I'm taking a shot. I added Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt onto the back of that running back room, just taking another chance at something that could end up being better than several of those other options, very possibly. Now, what I will say is both Krosky-Merritt, both Chris Rodriguez looked good in their opportunity Monday night. But, once again, stat lines. This is against Cincinnati's defense, which last year absolutely horrible against the run. It looks like they're going to once again be one of the worst teams, if not the worst team against the run in the league. So I don't want to overvalue that either. But that is it for this week's wrap-up of Preseason 2 takeaways. Lots of movement, lots of big news this week. So hope you pay attention. Like, comment, subscribe, please, if you like the video. Peace out.